Well, hello, people. D-Roy Cruz on my Big D channel. I just want to talk about pickups for a minute. I'm not. This was just on my mind, and I wanted to talk about it to all you who. I guess I'm trying to help you people that are tripping over the whole thing about pickups. If you're a brand new guitar player and you've been confused like I've been confused, I want to help you any way I can. I'll tell you my story, and if that helps, it helps. If not, you can put a dislike in the section. I don't care. Happy New Year, by the way. Let me just ramble off a little bit about my experience with this whole confusion about pickups. Let's start off with the fact that when I first started taking guitar lessons, the first guitar that I had one pickup on it. It was a Cruz guitar. I think Charvel and Cruz were the same company. Cruz was a cheaper version of Charvel, and Charvel was a cheaper version of, I don't know, Fender or one of them. It was just a cheap guitar company, and then Cruz, they were very limited in, their selection of guitars or whatever. But I had this Cruz guitar. That was the brand name of it. I think I might have had two of them. I think the one that I just gave away was a Cruz too. Well, I gave it away about 5 years ago. I think I had two Cruz guitars in my lifetime. One was a lovely Strat. Well, they were both lovely Strats. The second one was a little bit well made, but it was very fragile. 3 single coil pickups as usual, the typical Strat. Cheap imitation of Fender, but it had a very nice clean tone to it. How it handled the amps and that, okay. A friend of mine wanted a guitar, and I told him I'd buy him one, and he asked for that one. He said, "You don't have to buy me one. Just give me that one." And I looked at it, and I said, "Man, I'm going to miss this guitar." Because I used it as my practice guitar. And I gave him that one after I bought this one. This one I keep making all these YouTube videos about. Like, this is all I know. No, I'm going to tell you my story. I played a bunch of guitars in my time. This one I find a lot of satisfaction out of. But that Cruz guitar was very similar to the Squire. It was a typical, 3 coils, 5-way selector switch, 1 two-tone and 1 volume, the typical Strat. The neck and everything was identical to it. The only thing about it was, did it have a maple neck? It might have had a maple neck. This is rosewood. It might have had a maple neck. I'm not sure. But, anyway, the very first guitar that I had 1 pickup. It was a Cruz. It was black. You could look at it and see yourself. It was black like it had a black car finish on it. It was a beautiful guitar. And people loved it the way it looked, because like this, like my Schecter here, see these knobs here? The knobs had this same configuration where they were like see-through black knobs with glass over them or plastic over them. You could see right through them. It had that, which that was one feature of that guitar I do miss. I love the tone knobs and the volume knobs on that. But it was a typical Strat. It had a beautiful, one pickup. It had a beautiful sound. Moving on from there, I put a lot of wear and tear on that guitar very, very easily in a very minimal amount of time. Like I got gouge in the fretboard. All this was chipping away, and I didn't know anything about tonating my guitar at that time. I didn't know anything about fixing guitars at that time. I didn't know that I could put putty in there and fix that. So I was begging my wife at the time, because she was trying to get in the keyboards, and she wanted me to spend all this money on her for her keyboard career, which I did. So I said, hey, you know what? I need a new guitar. This is gouging out real bad, and I need a new guitar. I mean, you could stick your finger in there, and it would go right into the fretboard, right into the wood. Like, right down in the holes, okay? And it didn't affect the sound any. Sometimes if you did too much hammering on there, it would kind of like make an echo sound or something. But that's how fast that guitar was wearing and tearing. And I just told my wife, if we're going to shop, let's shop, okay? And I traded it into someone for parts. And we were so tight on our budget that I went to Hollowwood, Johnny B. Good, Hollowwood. We're in the same building over in Swissville, Pennsylvania. We went over there and we traded it in for parts. Giving that guitar up, especially the way we gave it away for parts, that made me feel, that was like putting away your dog. That's like putting your dog to sleep. Because that was the guitar where I first learned my first chords and scales, and I learned how to move around the guitar a little bit. I started writing little songs on that guitar, as I said in another video. That was an awesome guitar. One pickup, and the one pickup it had on it was a humbucker. I didn't know what a humbucker was back then. It had one pickup on it, and it was a humbucker. Okay? Usually when you have a guitar that only has one pickup on it, it usually is a humbucker. Okay? Moving on from there, I ended up with a PV. You can look this up on YouTube. I ended up with a PV Impact Forenza. Okay? PV Impact Forenza. Okay? And that was a very beautiful guitar. That guitar there, I think, had 2 single coils and 1 humbucker. I know it had 3 pickups on it. And I think it had a floating bridge. That might have been the first one I had with a floating bridge. And I love that guitar. I love to monkey around on a floating bridge. I have a quart in there with the same kind of bridge. But that PV Impact Forenza was a beautiful guitar, and it was this color. It was just like this. But I think it had 2 single coils, and I think it had a humbucker in the middle. And that's when I first really, right out of the store, when I was, in the store, the guy began to tell me, he's like, hey, you get this guitar, you won't be disappointed. It's got two single coils and a humbucker, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what that is, man. What is that? I don't care. You know what I'm saying? That those single coils on the guitars that I had in the past were just good, you know. And I really didn't really pay attention to single coil and humbucker. I really didn't pay attention to all that stuff. I just, would get on the guitar and, you know, just enjoy the clean tone of it, you know. I didn't play a lot of distortion, but one of the things that I did do is I had a board. I have my Zoom RU1 or R1U, however you pronounce that, on the floor there with my line 6 amp. That's just a twin, I think, small twin. But back then I had a Fender amp, an old beat up Fender amp, and it was pretty good. It actually was a keyboard amp. I found out later. I didn't know that either. Here all this time I'm enjoying my guitar. I'm playing into a keyboard amp. Somebody told me later at the music store when I went to trade that Fender amp in for another amp, he let me know that was a keyboard amp, bruh. You know? Like, man, I don't know. I don't know this stuff, okay? And my wife, she plugged her keyboard into it, and she loved to, like, borrow my amp, and now I see why, you know, because it was a keyboard amp. You know, she didn't know that either. She just knew, to her, an amp was an amp. It's all the same thing, you know. But anyway, moving on from there, I had this PV, and like I said, it had two single coils and a humbucker. And I noticed that was the first guitar that I ever owned that I experiment with other guitars, but I really only own couple Strats before that, and they were all the same to me. I couldn't really tell what they were like. But that Black Cruise guitar was my favorite. Today, if I could go back in time, I would keep that guitar, even if it was just a collector's item. I would keep that guitar. One pickup on that guitar, one humbucker, and it was an awesome guitar. And thinking back to that, I realized, along with what I learned the other night, where humbuckers come in at, you know. And if you notice, you'll find out that most guitars, now more and more guitars today, and in the early 90s when I started playing, around this era and that era, more guitars that are Strats now. More Strats now have not only the coil tap or coil splitter, but they have like two humbuckers and a single coil or two single coils and a humbucker. And that PV that I had was one of the first, guitar companies to start doing that. And just like this Schecter, it was pretty much set up like this Schecter, except that at that time I felt that all my guitars have to have tremolos, because on my first guitar, or whammy bars, tremolo bars, whichever one you want to call them, because on all my first guitars, I was a Strat man, and I felt that, the whammy bar has to always be there, because it ain't a guitar without a whammy bar. Okay. That's where my quart comes in, because when I got my quart, I bought that used, and it's an awesome guitar. I wish I had it fixed so I could give you a demonstration. That's another one of my favorites. But this is my Schecter. This Schecter here is my baby. That's my signature guitar. When I later on down the road, I'm going to have a guitar. I'm going to reinforce this Schecter into the guitar that I need it to be. I'm happy with it now, but I'm either going to have this Schecter guitar redone, rebuilt, or I'm going to make a replica of this Schecter guitar. Look. I want you to look at it while I'm talking. I'm either going to get this guitar redone. Okay, I might change the wooding and make it of a higher quality. I don't know if I really need this maple cap or not, but I think this is one of the only guitars that I've had. It is the only guitar that I've had that had a maple cap. Had this maple cap here. So I do like this maple cap. Now, there's a guy here on YouTube that loves to fight with people about tone wood. One thing about the tone wood is that if you don't have a maple cap, I think your wood does affect the tone. But when you have a maple cap, your wood doesn't affect the tone very much. And that's another reason why this is a very versatile guitar, because of the maple cap and the set-in neck. I don't know if that's a set-in neck. That's a glued-on neck. But set-in, glued-on, whatever. Okay? Just totally awesome. And this guitar is a little bit heavier than your typical Strat. Okay? But yet it's still very light. It's lighter than a Les Paul. Matter of fact, cheap guitars are not only cleaner, not only have cleaner single coils and humbuckers, but cheaper guitars are always lighter in body weight. So think about that before you go to acting like you got to have the most expensive thing out there. Take it from me working and gigging with people that have expensive guitars and have played cheap guitars, that you don't need a very expensive guitar to suffice your career. You just really don't. Don't get into that hype. You really don't. You don't need expensive guitars to broaden your career. You use whatever works for you. If $200 works for you and is the best thing you ever heard or the best feel you ever played in, just take good care of that $200. Keep taking it to the store and gluing it and fixing it and saving your money. Keep changing the pickups. Keep polishing it, putting a putty in there like I didn't do when I had a $300 guitar. You know what I'm saying? Like, keep fixing it now. And just let it work for you. If you go right here to YouTube, you'll find there's a lot of people out there to give their testimony that even when they rose to fame and became like this big time, guitar guru, okay, a genius, in their guitar collection are several cheap guitars. They're knockoffs. But this is what they practiced with. This is what they actually play on stage with, especially when it comes to a concert where you're constantly switching guitars, Anyway, moving on from the PV. The PV, I really loved it. And like I said, it had at least one humbucker on it, I think. And that was the first time that I ever really, really got into pickups. I started really messing with it. And the guy at the store, when he sold it to me, he wanted to sell it to me because of the name of it, the PV, the color of it, which was red and white like this. A better look, though. It was a heavier guitar. It was heavier than the Schecter, believe it or not. Around the same price as the Schecter. Way back then, it was more than a Schecter. It was a $600 and some guitar, and where they were getting their money for it from was the pickups, because it had two single coils and one humbucker. That was the configuration, so that's what they charged for. That was the money that they were making out of it. Outside of that, it was really about as cheap as the other Strats that I played. The Impact Forenza was a really good guitar, good feel. The typical Fender Strat, though, I think has a better feel than the Impact Forenza. But I love that guitar. I kind of miss it, in fact. I wouldn't mind having one floating around here just because I already had one, and I enjoyed it. But the Impact Forenza gave me trouble early. In I'd say about 3 years that I had it, I started to really pick it up and take some serious lessons on it and really started to play it. And I took it to my pastor at church one day and I says, listen to this. I showed him right here where somewhere down here between the 5th and the 7th fret, the bass strings were beginning to sound muffled. Even after being perfectly in tune, they started sounding kind of muffled. So, what they did was, what my pastor told me was that sounds like your truss rod. And instead of me taking it in and getting it fixed, because I was so afraid it was going to cost me a fortune and all this kind of stuff, I didn't care to look into this stuff or anything. It was on my list to sell. And I think it was right around the time of my divorce. I traded that in. Now, the cream and white colored Strat that I had from Cruise, the other one that I got later, was a gift from my wife. And I moved on from there to the Schecter. I had some other guitars in between the PV and that last Cruise that I had. I forget what they were. Oh, the Court. I had the Court. I've had that Court for a long time. The Court, I think I bought off my friend Bill Volgris. I bought that off of him. I think I traded him. That's what happened. I traded the PV for the Court to my friend Bill Volgris. And he said he could fix it. That's what happened. I didn't get it. I didn't sell that one for parts. I gave it to my friend Bill Volgris. Now, obviously, he had more trouble with it than the truss rod, because he never brought it out of the basement. He never brought the guitar out of the basement and tried to resell it like he did all the other ones. But when I got the Court, around the time I got the Court off of Bill, he's dead and gone today. Good old fella that played in the church band. He had a real strange way of playing leads and solos, and he didn't play bar chords. He played chord fragments, which I learned later what he was doing from Fred Sokolow, but he played chord fragments all up and down the neck instead of playing bar chords and, just playing open chords. He would play chord fragments all up and down the neck, and he would play the chord fragment, and he would play like these F chords up and down the neck, these F formations, okay? And he would just play them all up and down the neck, and he would play up and down the neck, up and down the neck, He would play that Fred Sokolow kind of stuff. We just keep on playing that stuff. And it was just awesome. It sounded good, There wasn't a whole lot of, awesome riffing that he did, and fancy lick playing. He just went up and down the neck with them chord fragments. He was an awesome guitar player. I miss the guy to death. You know what I mean? What he did in between the time that he sold me to Court and took my PV, he gave me about 4 or 5 guitars at one time. And this is where I begin to do my study on this whole pickup thing and single coils versus pickups. And I still couldn't get it until the other night. Either was it last night? The other night. It was more than the other night. It was last Tuesday. Last Tuesday that I discovered what it is I really like about pickups, different ones. So the guitars that I had that I played from him was a what's it called? What do you call that guitar? I gotta watch my time, man. Time goes so fast. The one guitar that I played was a Epiphone. Oh, come on. I forget the name of it. The one with the horns. It's equal on both sides. It's a long guitar. Epiphone. Darn it. I hate when I forget stuff like that. How could you? Oh, SG. Epiphone SG. I had an Epiphone SG. It was a guitar. It was heavy. By Epiphone, it was heavy. And I liked Epiphones by that time. Matter of fact, I had an electric guitar. Another electric guitar that had single coils and humbucker configurations on it. It was all black. But the floating bridge popped right out of the box. It was brand new. I took it back. The guy didn't want to fix it for me because it was going to cost him too much money. That's the guitar I gave away for parts. That Epiphone that guy wouldn't give me my money back for. And that was around the time I gave this guy my PV too. But he gave me the Epiphone SG. He gave me actually, I wanted to buy off of him. I wanted my next guitar to be the Ibanez Tailman. And he had 2 of them. And he gave one to a lady friend of mine. And she wouldn't let me take it home like he did. But she let me play it in church. We plugged it up. And I plucked around with it for an hour because I was really fascinated with this guitar. But I realized after plugging it up and sitting down with it, I realized that the feel wasn't what I thought it would be. And I wasn't really impressed with the sound as I thought I would be. But I still love the way that guitar looked, and I still do love the way that guitar looks. It had the lipstick pickups. That was my first time ever playing anything that had lipstick pickups. I also had the Ibanez Tailman. There's about 4 guitars that I played. I had those 2, the SG, the Tailman, and the Court. I kept the Court. The Court was one of them. I kept the Court. I bought it off him because that was, the cheapest. He wanted more money for the other ones. And there was another one. I think it was a Strat. It might have been a Gretsch. Oh, I know what it was. It was a Ibanez Telly. An Ibanez Telly. It was a Telly. But it was by Ibanez. And both the FG and the Ibanez Telly, when I gave them back to him, I missed them. Because there was something really significant about them. And that's where I begin to really, really, really get into falling in love with how guitars feel and what they sound like. I thought the SG was like this Schecter. This Schecter is very much like an SG. The SG was a heavier guitar, a bigger guitar. This way, long ways, it was a longer guitar. But it was comfortable to play. And I felt like this is a long guitar. I'm going to be glad to give this one up. But when I took it back, I missed it because I realized the sound was good. I loved that warm tone it had. And I loved the way it felt. Okay? But it was gone. Same thing with the Telly. The Telly, I didn't like the twang in it. I noticed the twang that you're talking about. Now, I played cheaper Tellys. But this one Telly that from Ibanez that he let me play, which lost a little black knob cover, fell off of it. I had to give it back to him without a knob cover. Other than that, it was a good, beautiful tone to it. And it was your typical Telly with your, it was set up just like your Fender Telly, but I think it was lightweight compared to a Fender. I love that maroon color that it had. It didn't have a pick guard, but it was real fascinating, and I didn't really understand how fascinating it was until I gave it back, and then I remembered the sound and the feel after I gave those guitars back. But I kept the Court, and the Court doesn't have as good a feel as my Schecter. It has the feel of a typical Strat because it is a Strat, but it's a smaller Strat. It has a smaller scale length. It has a C-shaped neck. The neck's a little bit fatter than these two guitars here. But it's still a fun guitar to play. I can't wait to get it fixed. It's going to be a keeper. Okay. Moving on from that experience, that was a good experience for me. Recently, I went from wanting the Epiphone Nighthawk to wanting the Epiphone Blueshawk, and I've been wanting these guitars desperately. Matter of fact, I'm still going to get the Epiphone Blueshawk. Even if I have to get it used, I'm going to get it. Okay, I gotta have it. I want it. I want the guitar because not only because it's semi-hollow body, but because of the Varitone. I want it, and I'm going to get it. I don't care if I have to find a good used seller to buy it. You don't take guitars that are that interesting and let them go out of stock, in my opinion. You keep them, even if you're not making any money on them. Keep a couple around, okay, and sell what you got first, okay, and then, keep a couple around, man. Those are really, really outrageously different guitars. Moving on from there, I recently went into Guitar Center, and I saw a Gibson. Now, I was going to get an Epiphone Nighthawk, and I'm still determined to get an Epiphone Blueshawk. Now, I know the Nighthawk is discontinued, but you can get that used too. But I definitely want a Blueshawk. Skip the Nighthawk, I want the Blueshawk. They're the same guitar, but one has the Varitone, the F-holes. The other one has some kind of strange pickup selection. I think it has a coil splitter, just like my Schecter. It's one of the guitars that I've actually listened to a guy play on YouTube and really sing, him do some amazing things with the sound. But the same thing for the Blueshawk. But I've always wanted a guitar that's semi-hollow, that's small enough, like a Strat or like my Schecter here, where I would like to feel. And I know that I played a jazz guitar one time because a guy that was training me in a band one time, he owned a jazz guitar, and he was really touchy about anybody touching it. And so I had to ask, and he stood there and watched me when I put that thing on my lap. That thing was heavy, and it was a big guitar. It was like an acoustic, like my arm went all around the body like this. I said, I'll never buy. He said, man, that guitar is about as big as you. I said, you're right. I'll never buy a guitar that big and that heavy, but it had a beautiful, gorgeous jazz sound to it. Beautiful, gorgeous jazz sound to it for a guitar that I'll never own. Neither do I care to own one, but I tell you what, I'd love to jam with somebody that owns one. It's a very nice guitar. It was the George Benson type of jazz guitar. It wasn't the George Benson signature one that he put a signature on, but it was the same kind of guitar that he played. Okay, I forget which one it was, and it was a Gibson. Okay, and beautiful sound, but too heavy and too big. Didn't love the feel at all. But I recently went into Guitar Center and found the Gibson Nighthawk. Not the Epiphone, the original Nighthawk. They were selling it used, and it had like a scratch on the body. And they were selling this guitar for $900 and something. I think originally it was like clearly over $1,000, maybe over $2,000, brand new for one of those. Even though they're out of print now, it's pretty pricey, but they were selling it used at Guitar Center, out my way, for $900 and some dollars. And I wanted to pick it up and try it out. That was the first time that I had ever got to know P90s, because the Gibson and Epiphone Nighthawk and Blueshawk have P90s. Okay? Now, let me say this real quick before I cut out. You can have a cheap guitar with humbuckers on it like I did when I started, and it can be a beautiful guitar. But if you're going to play single coils, I've learned this recently, that if you're going to play single coils, they're doing better now. They got guitars out there now that are a lot better, because they're not only giving you single coils anymore. Humbuckers used to be expensive. They have, any kind of Les Paul imitation, whatever, was kind of pricey. You didn't go get a guitar package with humbuckers on it. They were always single coils, and that's how you know. But if you really, really, really enjoy the sound of single coils, it would take a pricey, somewhat of a pricey guitar. I'd say $600 and up, for a good single coil electric guitar. You're talking, Eric Clapton doesn't play cheap single coil guitars. Neither does John Mayer. Okay, them guitars are pricey from the jump, and they, I can spare you. Don't spend cheap money on a single coil guitar, because single coils don't hold out like humbuckers. I've learned that. And the difference is when you're strumming, the difference when you're strumming. I did this the other night. I found out the difference between the single coil and the humbucker. The single coil is warm and dark, as people say. It has a more warm, pretty much dark in the mid-range, warm tone, almost acoustic. Whereas the humbucker, and now that you got coil tap and coil splitter and all like that, you can soften that as well. But even on the clean tone, I love the humbuckers because they have a fuller sound. And when you strum them, even in the clean channel, when you strum a humbucker, it has a bell to it. The notes ring out. You know what I'm saying? To separate the fact that you're playing an electric guitar, separate that from an acoustic. Depending on how well you have the sound balanced on a Strat, especially a cheap one, the tone is still going to sound muffled somewhat when you try to really, really get in there and play chords in clean tone. The other thing is, I don't like to hum. You know, when I finally started taking my Strats to gigs and playing with, you know, the people of God in the bands and stuff, I realized that Strats do make noise. They are noisy. And, like, if you're not, like, on a complete, you know, if you, even in modulation, your phaser, your flanger, all that, it will even make noise there in your amp. I've had this Schecter plugged in a number of different amps, and it ain't that expensive of a guitar, and no noise. You know, I used to sit in church with my Schecter in the band while the pastor was preaching in between songs, and there was, you know, but when I took a Strat, the pastor would turn around and look at me like, turn your amp off, man, because it's making a lot of noise. Because that's what the single coils do. And we don't use a lot of distortion in church. Now, I admit, I've never played a Strat that cost more than $600. Okay, that PV I had 2 single coils on it, and it cost, you know, around $600 and some dollars. And one of the single coils I really didn't pay attention to that much. But the humbucker in the middle position, well, the humbucker was in the middle position. I love the bridge position and the humbucker. But I think, if I remember correctly, the humbucker was my favorite thing to play. So there you have it. P90s, single coils, and humbuckers. Every pickup falls in between those three. Your mini pickups, your all your different other ones. They were talking about some other ones. Your lipstick pickups, you know, they fall between your P90s, your single coils, and your humbuckers. P90 on that Gibson Nighthawk, I was not impressed with. Maybe on another guitar, I would be impressed with it. But that P90 was like, and some people like that, but it had so much power to it. It was like playing by itself. Okay, the sound kind of like wanders off somewhere into another dimension when you go to like getting into some relentless strumming. And some people like that. I'm not too crazy about that. I like to be in control of what I'm doing. P90s are really different, and I think that I might have some songs that might be perfect for P90s, but I really wasn't impressed with it at that time. But there you have it, folks. I don't have to do a part 2. I'm all done. So thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of this. I will see you soon with another one. God bless. Happy New Year.